So is there more to this? Because I want to tie it into what's going on.
No. So this is general about the power of districting, which leads into what is going on right now in the country, which is both Texas and California are going through major redistricting specifically to try to utilize this power.
If you guys want to know, the reason this is sort of coming up in the news is that the 2026 midterms are coming up for the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives is pretty important to have a majority in because you set the agenda for what's going on. You control budget and spending. It's where all tax and spending starts. You control a lot of oversight and investigation panels. A lot of budgets are set there. Like, it's just a really important thing to control. And so both the Democrats and Republicans really want to control it. Especially Republicans currently have the lead. They don't want to lose it. So Trump put some pressure on Texas Governor Greg Abbott to find him 5 more seats was the idea. He needs to get 5.
That's such a good euphemism. Just find me 5 more seats.
5 more seats because Texas has enough Republicans that they can slice this.
Do they have? Let me look up the number while you're doing that.
Yeah,
it's like when he called the Georgia Secretary of State.
And
he was like, just find me. Can you just find me the votes?
That's so sick. What a good euphemism. Okay.
So that pressure kicked off, and now Abbott is looking to, again, redistrict Texas to slice it in a different way to where they end up with 5 more. If the vote goes the way they expect, and the Republicans vote the way they want, they end up with 5 more House of Representative seats for Texas in the next election, 2026. And so in response, California and Gavin Newsom are firing back and basically doing the same thing and redistricting and try to get 5 seats of their own. I think it is 5, right?
That's what, it is 5.
5 seats of their own. So if they both fully accomplish their goals, it'll net out even. But a lot of other states are now jumping in on the fray. It's becoming like this. I think the main takeaway is that both sides really are starting to see elections as existential more than they used to. It's been ramping up, but this midterm, you can clearly see that like there's nothing off the table to like get it done, to do whatever it takes to get back a majority.
I think there's sort of an arms race here, right? Where normally the way redistricting works at this level is every 10 years, the US collects and publishes the census. So like the 2020 census, the 2010 census, and that information about our population, our demographics, is used to set the districts as they are in each of these states. It's a process that each of these states handle. And in general, it's breaking form or decorum to start redistricting during a period that is this far away from the last census. It's like, in general, you would try and wait until the next 10-year mark to do this. That is one of the things that's being criticized about these changes, is that you're clearly taking action for the midterms, and this is something that is not common or not something you're supposed to do. I think with how heavy that narrative has been perpetuated, I had an idea that this must barely happen ever, but there are cases in a number of states over the last, in this century, of states choosing to redistrict in the in-between terms of those censes. Census.
Yeah, states do it, but I think my understanding is that, you know, the national census happens every 10 years. That's it. And they're trying to push, or at least Trump's trying to push for a 2025, middle of the 10 years, we're just going to do it early. We're going to do a national, just right before 2026, basically.
Yeah.
And then redraw everything now. Do you know anything more about that? Is there a reason or a rationale? I mean, the reason is like to get more seats, right? But what is the...
Oh, so this is from my understanding, let's say the villain share argument here is that the census data that we collect, similar to the jobs data that we had referenced a while ago, and maybe the argument for hiring the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics was this census data is wildly inaccurate, is not reflective of the population as it stands now, especially because that census data was collected during and through COVID and the pandemic, which was such a tumultuous time. And too much has changed about population and demographics since then. And we need to, update the census and push forward a new effort to collect a new national census data at a time when we wouldn't otherwise be doing one, at least at that level. Also, because that data is A, inaccurate, or B, perhaps you think that because the data was finalized and published under the Biden administration, that data is inaccurate and being used and weaponized against Trump and the Republicans in power right now. My understanding is the data was collected during the Biden or the previous Trump administration during COVID as best as possible, and then was finalized and published during the Biden administration.
Okay.
So it's like, well, maybe the data is inaccurate. Maybe this is reflective of a process that isn't working for us anymore, and we need to step up and take these actions now. And it's not all about winning the midterms.
I don't like this argument you're making. I'm leaving the party.
You've already lost one.
Well, there's a lot. I think what we
If
don't
you lose
think about.
like 8, it collapses,
Yeah, yeah.
right? If you have such thin margins, if you lose like 8 people, you go to 0% of the vote.
The guy was like, I want free candy too. And we're like, dude, we got to keep you, man. Like,
What we don't think about here
we would have the same problem. There could be like 5 kingmakers in our party who like demand shit from us.
All the way down till one guy in Rhode Island is just determining the fucking.
Since the collection, I would argue that since the pandemic happened, a skyrocketing number of Aiden and Lemon Party supporters that just were not accounted for in the previous
I
census.
see. So we have
it
to
seems
redraw.
weird that we wouldn't do it again.
Well, I can show you this graph. Can you pull this up, Perry? This is a bipartisan estimate of how many seats each individual state has gained from gerrymandering. Now, many states don't have a conclusive bias in gerrymandering or gerrymandered stuff, but these are the key examples. So Illinois for the Democrats is clearly drawn in such a way to where they're getting more seats than they probably would if it was perfectly aligned. And the same is true for Republicans in Texas and Florida, and then a bunch of other like southeastern states. So here's the thing. Both parties have been doing this, but the current net advantage, from what I can find, is 17 seats in total for Republicans in the last House elections. So in the last House elections, Republicans got probably 17 more seats than the voting percentages overall for the country would indicate that they should get.
Well, so,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's what I thought too, but I think even this is about like really blatant gerrymandering, because I read an article by the AP that basically 41 out of the 44 states with more than one congressional district, the winning presidential candidate had a larger share of the state's congressional seat than the presidential vote. Basically, that means that no states can get this perfectly right. It's incredibly hard to district in a way that's fair. And are people distribute? The population is distributed in a certain way. And the idea with gerrymandering is you make these weird shapes to try to include however many people you want. But ultimately, you can only influence that so much. Like in the desert area of California, very, very Republican. You're not going to be able to really
Slice
do
it the
that.
right way.
So
Yeah.
there are some really good in-depth explanations about this stuff. I think the example I actually saw from a long time ago was in Chicago, where when you're talking about how you draw these districts in what is supposed to be a representative democracy, what are the lines that these things should actually be drawn around? That's not to say that there's no abuse in the system, but if you're trying to do it as honestly as possible, what is more reflective of groups' opinions, right? Do I draw it in like a distribution of equal area? That seems like a fair place to start. But actually, communities congregate in much different ways than that, right? There might be a group of people of the same like immigrant background or the same like working class background that are in a weird shape in a city and are around a very different type of minority group in that same city. What is the fairest way to separate those groups of people? Because
assigned housing.
and in Singapore, they simply would have. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind is even when you're trying to do this as genuinely as possible, the arguments for how you put these people together are not super straightforward.
Yeah, so here's the example I want to use, which is California, the districting is decided by an independent commission. So in theory, it's unbiased, right? Versus some of the other states where
But they did a vote to change it. Right? That's the point, right?
No, they're well, I know it's like coming up, but just like right
Yeah,
now.
for now,
So
yeah.
60% of California voted for Kamala Harris. So 40% voted for Trump in California, but Democrats have 83% of the House seats. So it's not that California is gerrymandered necessarily, but it is districted in a way where the Republicans in California get about half the voting power that they should. So even in that graph that's like California isn't gerrymandered their way to more stuff, the reality is the Democrats in California right now have far more voting power than they should at a national level compared to the actual representation of California, which just gets the whole problem. It's so...
And it'll be exponentially worse after this. Both
Yeah,
in
and they're
Texas
trying to
and in
make it work.
California.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it'll be-
this only worsens the issue. So to tie it into like directly where we're at right now, Texas was the first state by Trump to be pressured to make these changes. California stepping up to counter it. After that was brought into play, a bunch of other Republican states were also
Florida,
getting pressure
Illinois, and everyone's jumping in
to make the changes. Besides them, now there's a bit of a decision lag, but other Democratic states like New York are trying to step up to see if they can make these changes in time for the midterms as well. But because they're on the back foot responding, it's unclear whether the votes or the policy changes at a state level are going to come in time for the midterms in order for those changes to be made at all.
I heard it described as, in a normal democracy, the voters should choose their candidates or their representatives. In gerrymandering, the representatives choose the voters. Like you're picking the ones that will give you the result you want and slicing it in a way. And I find it to be, we can throw around, I do think it looks like the Republicans are doing it, or at least getting more of an advantage. They've done it more successfully. But it feels like for the all voters, it just means our vote is getting thrown out. It doesn't matter as much in every state that we live in. Like it's getting so widespread that we're getting to the point where the elections are being drawn ahead of time. Like we're not.
So what I wanted to ask you guys, the reason why Gavin Newsom is stepping up to challenge this in California, right, is because of a political goal at a national level. Whether it's selfish and he sees this as his opportunity to push himself as like the next candidate for the Democratic Party at a national level, or whether it's genuine in this is the most important way we need to combat, fight fire with fire and make sure that they can't gain all these seats and we just sit here and do nothing. And what I wanted to ask you guys is, how does this process make you feel at an individual level? Because part of me is like, yes, I want this to happen in California because it's necessary to engage in this battle of national politics, and I don't want to be put on the back foot in this Democrat versus Republican fight. But also, as an individual voter, I don't think it's really fair or good that the system works this way at all, and that we're pushing further and further down a way that reduces the power of individuals voting in states where they're the political minority.
Right. It blows. It fucking blows is I think the obvious answer here. Yeah, speaking from personal experience, I at multiple times have not voted for president in California because I know my vote doesn't matter. It's like, why? And I know I'm sure people would have issue with that, but there's been a few elections that I've been a part of where, despite what that one guy in the YouTube comments thinks, I vote Democratic, but then in California it doesn't matter. That feels bad that because of the way that we're grouped together, which is all of California goes to a single group, it doesn't matter. My vote for the president doesn't matter. And then that same thing you can apply at all these different scales like we talked about. And then the thing when I was doing this research that really made me feel weird about it is less about the funny scenario where with 0.08% of the vote we get control. That is very funny and we could do that, but is actually this one, which is that in the theoretical Lemonville, where you have 60% of the vote, if you district correctly, you can take 100% of the representation. So it's much more likely that the group in charge can not only would they have the voting power to start the redistricting process, they are much more capable of outsizing their advantage. And the fact that California right now is 83% represented by Democrats, Florida is now 72%, Texas is trying to get to 79%. It's just swinging way out of whack with how people actually vote.
I think everyone alive would say the fair thing is you get around 6 seats. If you had 60% of the vote,
yes.
And if you're going to get 10, then every state that doesn't do gerrymandering is becoming less relevant. They're falling behind.
Do you see any way that this stops? I don't see any way that this stops. Now that the Pandora's box is open, any blue state who has control of their house and is we can start a redistricting vote, we can literally find 3 more seats. Everybody's going to do it. This is really pretty depressing to me.
Not only that they could do it, they almost have to do it without,
right.
The
it's
arms race is open.
irresponsible to not do it.
Yeah. That's the situation we find ourselves in, where, we have to almost pray that it evens out. It's 5 from Texas, 5 from California.
Yeah, but your vote feeling so useless, I agree. I remember when, I think it was the 2016 election, and I lived in Washington State, and I think I voted in the primary, and then my ballot got mailed to my parents' house instead of where I was living in Seattle at the time. And then I just didn't vote that year. And it was the first election I could vote in. Hillary won in Washington, right? It's me not voting didn't feel like this huge difference maker at the time, especially because I was fucking 18 and I didn't think about my vote much beyond the president.
Right. It was, to be clear, it was also when I was younger is when I was.
But I think it's got to be frustrating both ways if you're a Republican in California, you feel like it's basically a wash. Like, what can I realistically win on at a national level? Kind of feels like nothing. But if I'm a Democrat, the idea that like I can kind of tell myself I don't even have to show up today and it doesn't matter. And I'm not saying that either of those perspectives are true in the sense that, voting is important at so much more like local levels as well. When you show up, you vote on so many more things that affect your like state or district at a more personal level. But I think a lot of people forget about the things that aren't headlines. It's why people vote less in the midterms to begin with. It doesn't attract all of the same political attention from voters.
This is why I've been thinking we go back to the Roman system of we all meet in the forum and you can beat people with clubs. Right. Yeah, hash it out is a good way of putting it. Yeah.
You say Roman forum because I was literally thinking of that book we read about the polarization in Rome.
So I looked into this. I was like, why the fuck do we have a representative democracy? Why doesn't everybody just put in a vote for what they want? So not only was it logistical reasons when the country was started, you couldn't have the Pony Express fucking mailing in every vote.
Sure.
But on top of that, so like James Madison talked about it in the Federalist Papers, and he's like, we don't want a mob. If you have, 10,000 people show up to vote and 6,000 of them are voting on one side, they can just physically intimidate the other side and completely control.
That's gangster.
And that is
That's
what
awesome.
happened in Rome. And they specifically called that out. And we're like, we don't want to be like that. So this system where we vote for representatives, they will have a mature, stable government, and they will be able to have the nuance that a mob would not be able to. So they thought of this, and they're like, but now in modern day, it's like, maybe we should everybody votes, everybody just types it into.
I mean, I've thought about this since the year 2001 when they were doing nationwide voting for American Idol, and it seemed to run fun. Like, why can't I just get on my phone?
I wasn't even born then. I don't even know what you're talking about.
You were 30.
All right, villain chair. I don't think Russia or like China is thinking about hacking the American Idol voting system, right? I feel like that's the argument against digitizing.
They
the
wanted
vote.
Ruben Sutter to win in fucking Putin's Russia.
Putin wanted Ruben.
I
dude.
want big balls to
Putin in charge
code
at the time?
our Democrat voting system.
But isn't that the argument behind, I guess is the argument behind mail-in ballots, and it's not true either. But the argument about any of these things that would make voting more efficient or more easily accessible is you're sacrificing the security of the elections.
Well,
right?
I saw a tweet that they're stuffing the ballots.
Yeah.
I don't
even know what that
president
means.
say that this morning when I was watching.
I saw a blurry video on Twitter where a guy is stuffing papers into a box. Checkmate.
It was a press conference about like moving Space Force from Colorado to Alabama, and he spent a good chunk of it talking about how Colorado sucks because they have mail-in voting and it's all fraudulent. This is all part of this push for 2026 of doing whatever is possible to stack the deck to make sure, because the stakes are so high. So he wants to ban mail-in voting because it favors Democrats, and they both want to redistrict because they favor each other. And then, there's the National Guard appearing in blue cities as possible, intimidation. I want to show one more thing though, because this is I think a really cool graph if you can pull it up. And it ends before it even gets super bad. This is how often, the blue dot would be Democrat, red's Republican, how often they collabed or voted on the same thing. So the gray is good. Basically, the gray is like a bipartisan bill.
So it means the two parties came together and collaborated.
If there's
on
a gray
something.
dot, that means they connected on something. And so you can see in the 40s and 50s, there's a lot of gray. I mean, there's a pretty big overlap. They often would find some sort of common ground to get something passed. Keep going. By the 80s, they've sort of started to split apart. By the 90s, it's entirely apart. By the 2000s, there is almost no gray at all. By 2011, you see in 2007, there's like literally one line. And this stops at 2011, but my understanding is it has become essentially non-existent. It's two completely divided parties, and you cannot get something passed in this country unless you have a majority, which has caused everything to slow down. Trump is the most extreme example, but executives, the president, has been taking more and more power because nothing gets done the other way. So they're just grabbing it. They're just grabbing it and doing things. And the American public, I don't think, is pushing back as much as they should because our normal representative system is not able to make progress.
Well, I think the broader argument, the pro argument for these types of actions being taken, like this sort of redistricting, or you could take it to, other actions Trump's having right now, but other executives in the past too, is that nothing through our congressional process gets done right now. And that's very frustrating to the average person. They want to see action taken and results from that action as soon as possible. People are, I would say, understandably impatient, maybe not reasonably so, but understandably so. It's like, if I want the executive to take action because this polarization exists, I want the redistricting to happen because it enables the part, even though it sacrifices something about our democratic process, it enables the party in power that I voted for to finally fucking take action, which is something that I've been waiting 10, 20 years for. How do you argue with that person? Because like you said, you don't see a version of how this issue with gerrymandering gets fixed. Does that mean we just sit and wallow in a system that produces no results forever? Does it mean I finally get to admit that I'm happy with the executive taking action because it's
even on
something?
the Democratic side, like I want to say, like, my head and my heart have a different, like, as we had said before, like, I prefer not to have any gerrymandering. I prefer to try to get it as fair as possible. But in this moment where I am really unhappy with, like, the big, beautiful bill and things the House has been passing, I can see myself, like, giving credit to Newsom for just doing action. I think there's a bias towards action. But I can see why. I can see why someone would hate it on the other side. I get it. I'm understanding why a tectonic plate frustration in this country is causing people to, like, support things they wouldn't normally support. Like, just movements, just making some action. Versus, like, I don't know, like a strongly worded letter from Hakeem Jeffries or something. I want to see, like, something being done to try and counter it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
If your main way of interacting with politics for the last 2 decades is gazing at gridlock and feeling like nothing is done, then maybe you're just happy to see.
Well, except for war. They're pretty down for war still.
Yeah, but that doesn't even count.
That doesn't count.
People are just happy to see action taken for action's sake. Like, they're willing to look the other way. The cognitive dissonance necessary to look the other way on these infringements of, like, due process or rights or the status quo is fine because at least something is getting done.
If somebody at your office isn't doing their job, are you okay with your boss? Just maybe you slide over to his desk and you just start doing his work. Like, at some point, you just want it to get done, right?
Are you taking on your boss's work for free because he's not doing it?
No, Trump is taking on
his employees' work?
He's doing the homework of the Congress. Yeah. This analogy makes sense, okay?
Pop quiz for you guys. Do you know where the word gerrymandering comes from? This is a factoid that you will be able to take. Do you know where the word gerrymandering comes from? Aiden, TikTok. If you don't know it, you have to say, I'm a little stupid boy.
I'm a little stupid boy because I don't remember.
There was a man named Elbridge Gerry. He's one of the least known founding fathers, but he is a founding father. And in, I don't know, the 1800s, I don't remember the exact year, he decides to redistrict to help the Federalist Party. And he creates a district, can you show my screen? That looks like a salamander, I guess. It's so long and narrow, and it helps all the Federalists get a majority.
Dude.
And so a local newspaper, draws this political cartoon and calls it gerrymandering because of salamander.
Oh, because it looks like okay, wow.
Because, like, so after Aiden's done, we'll call it Calvin snaking or something.
Yeah, lemon
We need
party.
a new
Calvin
fresh name.
lemoning, yeah. But that's where it comes from. So yeah, I think we all agree it kind of sucks, but it's happening and it's going to be hard to reverse.
Yeah, by definition, because once you
Once
redistrict
you have
and you
it.
get control, you have the ability to prevent any vote to undo it.
One little thing I saw that was interesting when I was reading into it was that states that don't have control of the judiciary, like, almost what I found is almost everybody tries to gerrymander, but if you don't have control, like solid control of the judiciary, usually your gerrymandering gets undone. Like, later on, they'll strike it down or redo it. That is one of the main things that has made Republican states more effective at it, is that they both put in their gerrymandering plans and the Republican ones can keep it because their courts don't overturn it, is what I saw in the research. So that's where we find ourselves. I mean, I don't know if we have any...